Alright, so back to the BMW. I scanned it again, and now we have two faults in the engine control module. So let's see what other fault we set by unplugging that. I keep forgetting the name. That little box. That guy. Read fault code. (4BAC, 4BAB), and the description's exactly the same. Evaluation electronics with a fuel level sensor transmit the information all sensors wet immediately, following by all sensors dry within a period of 70 seconds. If the change in condition does not occur within the time period the fault is set. That's pretty cool. Okay, so now we have some idea of how this sensor works. It's a 4-wire sensor. There's a reference, and then there's a low, medium, and high wire. So apparently as the fluid level rises, it just, makes or breaks continuity in those three circuits that are positioned on this rod inside the tank. It should be a pretty simple system here. So that's what we're looking at. Red, green, and yellow. So I don't know if that's closed or open. Let's see, what would happen if we unplug it, but then we're on the sensor side right now. I don't know what happened there. I basically want to know what a known good, known bad, a wet sensor, or a dry sensor signal is. Now we do have another similar level sensor in the passive tank, also 4 wires, so I could definitely just hook up the Pico to that one and see if we see something similar to this active tank sensor. Again, we're not sure if it's a wiring problem, like a contact pin fitment issue, or if the sensor itself is bad. I want to know if that waveform right there is good or bad. Alright, so we're learning about the system, right? So these numbers, the 66.9%, I think means 2 of the sensors are wet, 1 sensor is dry. So these tanks are, right now they're at least 2/3 full. It's not going to give you, to the 100th%. It'll just give you 1 sensor, 2 sensors, or 3. So it'll be like 33, 66, or 100. So that's the way these work. Now we need a known good or a known bad. So let's see, how do I want to do this here? So let's plot these guys. I'm going to try to make it act up again. We're going to look on the scope if anything changes. We've seen that this COM wire, the duty cycle, I guess, kind of tells the computer what the actual reading is. So let's see if we can wiggle something and make it act up. So I'm going to play around with it, try to make it act up. Okay, I think we're getting somewhere. So you see these 2 spikes right there. It went up to 100% from 66. That is happened right here. Let's see if we can zoom in on this here. I kind of shook the tank around, and right here the you see the third, I guess the high sensor. that waveform changed. It went from like a gradual slope to one of these more a sharper spike. You see the difference between that guy and that guy, and that I think is reflected on our, from our analyzer on the duty cycle right here. So when it got thin, right as I shook the tank, we read 100%. So I think that was normal. Now, why would this thing be dropping out to 0? That I can't answer right now, because that would mean that these two right here would have to be, whatever the dry signal is. So I want it to drop down to 0 like it was doing before. So right now I think it's good. So something is intermittent here. Alright, so getting somewhere as usual. So there's a signal. We're at 66%, and if I shake the tank and get that sensor wet, check out what happens to that yellow wire. It starts looking like the other two. And we can make the data stay at 100%. I keep shaking it. There's definitely a difference. So, but now I want to make it drop out to 0, and then we'll see if it's a sensor issue or if this box is just going berserk. Alright, so I cleared the fault codes, and right now that's the sensor data. The Y is the COM only reporting 10%. Let's tap on the box a little bit, or wiggle the tank. What changed? Now our duty cycle is higher. So from there, when we wiggle the tank, right there, we went high, and then we went normal. What the heck is going on? Now it's back at 10%. Let me save these waveforms. Here's what the scan data looked like. We're climbing up, and we shook the tank right there. It started climbing up, and then it dropped out. And now it's back to 10%. So something is wrong here. And it doesn't look like it's the sensors dropping out. I don't know about you guys, those sensors look fine. Let's shake it again. Sensor got wet. We should be at 100. Should be at 60. Now let's look for the dropout again. Did it drop out? It did. Shake it again. Sensor's wet. Sensor should be dry. Ah. Boom, right there. There was the dropout. So, right there, the computer did not like something. So we're good, we're at 60%. Right there, our duty cycle changes, comes back, and drops out low. That's our 10% number. Look at that. So if you look at these waveforms, that is not a good waveform right there. If you go back a few, let's see. Here's where the sensor was wet. It likes that. It's at 100%. Boom. That's still okay. You know, we're at 60%. So we're at 100. We're at 60. But then this, it almost looks like the decay just takes too long. Right there. See, it came and decayed to 0 all the way. And then it drops here. So this part of the waveform looks like it's bad. And then eventually the computer or the analyzer, little box, whatever, it says, okay, we're done. I don't like this signal. The signal did not change. I don't like it. We drop down to our default value. And right now we're at 10%, so the car does not like this at all. Let me shut the engine off and see if this data PID returns, and look at our ramps again on the third sensor. Now, the owner tells me he just wants to sell the vehicle, so if he fills up that DEF tank and it reads 100%, computer's happy, he can sell it, and then I'm sure the check engine light will come back as soon as that DEF mixture level falls below whatever, that first sensor. That could be a short-term fix. You just keep your DEF topped up and check engine light will stay out. Otherwise, you need to replace this tank for, like I said, $1,700 just for the part, plus labor, plus diag, over $2,000 easy. So, last experiment. Let me save this waveform, and we'll shut the engine off, see if our signal returns. So I'm going to turn the engine off. Something's still happening. There's our signal. We're still at 10%. Right there. Let's shake the tank. Get that sensor wet. So, oh, there it goes again. It dropped out. Boom. Did not like that. So I guess for a while there, we couldn't recreate it. It was working fine. It was, you know, dead solid at 60%, and then we shook the tank and went to 100. Now, it's dropping out to 10%, and it's just going to stay at its default value since it does not like this. We could go to the passive tank, do the same experiment since that one is only, whatever, 66% full, and see what a known good dry sensor looks like. If that's easy to do, I'll do it. If not, this thing needs a freaking level sensor. No doubt about it. So there's nothing wrong with our, what is that box called again? Let's see. Evaluator, not analyzer, it's the evaluator. That's this little guy right here. And I was thinking, if those two boxes are the same from the passive to the active tank, we could swap them around, see what happens. But they have different part numbers slightly. I don't want to mess with that too much. So all we can do is scope a signal at the passive tank and see if it's the same. So, I wish these diagrams weren't cut in half. But on our passive tank, alright, we have 4 pins, 1 ground, 2 level high, 3 level low, and 4 is again ground. So if our data stream shows that we're, you know, somewhere in the middle, it's showing 60%, but again, it only has 2 sensors, so one might be, you know, a third of the way up, the second one is like 2/3 of the way up. Those 2 middle wires on the passive tank should have some kind of a signal. So, in the sake of science, I have bent back this exhaust heat shield, and we're back probing. Let's see here. Let's back probe one of the middle wires. This is a tough camera shot, people. Okay, there's one of them. Let's look at the signal. Back to our pico scope. Oh, pico. There we go. That's live data right now. So the red trace is on the passive tank, one of the wires. So you see, that's what's, you know, I'm guessing that is a wet sensor, right? Cool. Now let's probe the other one, and since this tank is definitely not full, the second wire should have something different on it, and that's what we're after. This should be a dry sensor. So that blue wire should be a dry sensor. Come on. Okay, there we go. See the red trace? That is a dry sensor. Compare that to the yellow trace, which is a dry sensor on our active tank. That is exactly what the evaluator does not like. So either the resistance in there is getting wonky, out of spec, but that is a bad waveform. That yellow, see the decay isn't fast enough, it doesn't go to ground. The red is a known good dry sensor. That's cool. Now I feel good telling him either fill it up with DEF fluid and sell it, or replace that tank. There is another option. There is another option, people. I did look online. I found this company, Zemodex Technology. Products for BMW. Emissions control products. DEF repair kit for BMW X5 diesel. That is us. And what that is it's a heater and the temperature / level sensor for a low price of $550. So I guess if you want, you can take apart your DEF tank, rebuild it. So that'll obviously be extra labor, but in the long run it's not going to be $2,000. It might be like, oh, I don't know, $1,200 or $1,300 for the total repair. So I'll give the customer the option, but that was a cool diagnosis. More Euros, keep them coming. See you guys next time. Bye bye. A little bonus footage, just because I'm curious. I have the level sensor unplugged and just one of the those sense wires back probed, and here's what our pattern looks like. This is unplugged. I think that's pretty cool. So just for reference, to keep in the waveform library. And here is our other sense pin. This is the second one, which would be the red wire. So we have kind of a double hump. And if you remember, when it was plugged in, we had that kind of a little double spike. So the actual fill sensor modifies the signal, and that's how the evaluator knows which sensor is wet and which sensor is dry. Just to exercise the pico here a little bit, the yellow trace right here is a reference waveform from our one of the waveforms when the sensor was plugged in, and this is when it was the dry sensor. The blue trace is when that pin is completely unplugged. That yellow, high level sense pin. Check out how similar those signals are. There is a difference, but to the computer, that sensor might as well be unplugged. That's why it's not happy. So I'm guessing that when the sensor is dry, the resistance is just too high. It's almost an open circuit, and that is why we're getting a waveform that's very similar to the unplugged waveform. I don't want to beat this to death, but I think that's pretty cool to showcase what you can do here. You can even overlay these like so, and wow, I mean, that is really super similar. So I think it's pretty cool. You can see they peak at 4 volts. That peaks at 4 volts right there. And it's supposed to drop to 0, and it does not. Alright, enough bonus material. See you guys next time. Bye-bye.